All right. Let's call the order. Welcome to the September 11th, 2024 Park and Recreation Board meeting. Let's do the roll call. Ryan Cambridge, Vice President.
Here.
Kurt Sparksdale.
Here.
Kimberly Lane, she's not here. Michael Kaufman, absent. Chad Dilley.
Here.
Matt Milburn.
Here.
We have a quorum. So let's do the approval of the August 14th, 2024 minutes. I'm going to get a chance to approve the minutes as presented.
Yes.
Any questions or concerns?
No.
We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Next is the minutes for the special session, and we'll get a chance to review those.
Yes.
Yes.
Anyone have any questions or concerns?
No.
We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Those approved say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. All right. Next is public presentation and comments. Is anyone online who wants to speak? There's no one here as well at this time, so we'll move on. Park Foundation update with Chris.
Okay. So the Parks Foundation secured funding in the amount of $100,000 from the Ephraimson Family Fund for a wetland boardwalk at Carpenter Nature Preserve.
Wow.
They had a booth at several of the recent park events, such as the Creek Cleanup and the Bee Local Concert. They handed out approximately 180 native blue asters at the Zionsville Farmers Market recently. And with some grant funding from the Community Foundation of Boone County, they had a booth at the Fall Festival where they gave away 225 spice bush plants in exchange for the promise to rid your yard of any invasive species you might have, or to come to a weed wrangle. And those went very quickly, so that was very popular. And then Jim and Nancy Carpenter gave a fun and informative speech on native species in Zionsville and displayed some Carpenter Nature Preserve renderings at the Fall Festival, and they were a big hit. And they were able to, get the community excited about that project. On October 25th, mark your calendars because they are holding their first fundraising event. It'll be at October 25th again at 8 a.m. It's Parks and Pastries. And is it going to be a breakfast? The mayor will be there, Jared will be there, and they're featuring Martha Hoover of the Patachu Foundation. So that should be fun. You can get tickets on Eventbrite.
Who was the donor again for the wetland walk? Sorry?
The Ephraimson Family
okay.
Fund
Fantastic.
for the wetland boardwalk.
That's phenomenal.
No, it's great.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Chris in the Parks Board? All right, very good. All right, staff reports. Jared.
Thank you, John. It appears we do have one person online. Never mind, they're no longer signaling that they would like to speak.
Okay.
So we'll move into staff reports. Our maintenance team was busy in the month of August at Mulberry Fields assembling and installing recycled picnic tables. So as you may recall, earlier this year, this board authorized the purchase of these picnic tables, which were in part funded by the Boone County Solid Waste Division grant. So we are beginning to assemble and install those. Each shelter at Mulberry Fields will now have an accessible bench as well as 3 traditional recycled benches. And then the existing wooden benches that were there will be sanded, resealed, and utilized in our rustic parks throughout the park system. Speaking of maintenance, in the month of August, they completed 486 work orders. 297 of those were preventative and 219 of those were reactive. Our natural resource team identified a yellow flowered teasel appearing in Overly Warman Park. This is of extreme concern because there is only one other location in the North America where this yellow flowered teasel has appeared, and it was within the Indianapolis metropolitan area. So now there's 2 confirmed sites, so we are attempting to survey all of our parks near Eagle Creek and identify if there's any more stands being established. This This teasel is invasive from the other part of the world, but the big problem with it becoming established is it does go to seed at a different time than our existing invasive teasels. So now we're talking about 2 species that'll have an opportunity to thrive. And this species seems to like being near creeks and doesn't mind a little shade. So we are attempting with our natural resource team to eradicate as much as we can and continue to monitor the seed bank and anything that pops up in subsequent years. So to date, since this discovery midsummer, we have removed 5 truckloads of the invasive teasel, and we have began a multi-agency conversation with other affected parties trying to identify the root of what brought it to North America, as well as identifying any other populations that might pop up in central Indiana. And finally, had the opportunity to sit on a Boone County Strategic Trails conversation with the Central Indiana Trails stakeholder group. So Visit Indianapolis is conducting kind of an input session with stakeholders from around the donut counties to discuss collaboration and potential branding of Central Indiana trails. And that is all from the superintendent report.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, not about the invasive, that's for sure. So,
Yeah.
what was that invasive? What was it called again?
So it is a yellow flowered teasel. It's different than the purple flowering teasel you've likely seen throughout Central Indiana, and it's very peculiar because there was only one other documented case, and it was on Butler University campus where they published a paper in 2021. So we're discussing existing contractors and what some of the potential pathogens might have been for getting that established in these 2 unique areas. But we've had conversations with community members down in Brown County, and we're just trying to see exactly how widespread this new invasive has become.
How did it get discovered?
It was identified by either the Boone County Invasive Cooperative, BCIC, who we partner with regularly, or it was Central Indiana Land Trust. I can't remember who got to it first and alerted us. But once identified, we mobilized our team and eradicated the stands we found and then have continued to monitor. And fortunately, those 5 truckloads were captured before they went to seed. So at this point, any additional flowering plants we find we'll bag up and properly dispose of. But
So it's similar to garlic mustard where you can pull it and it's okay, it's better, it's good to pull and then,
yeah, any chance we can get to grab these before they go to seed is just going to help us not have to deal with quite as many future generations.
we appreciate the quick response. So. All right, next, Director of Recreation Services, Mindy Murdoch.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So August, we finished up our summer camps, of course. We also had Creek Week. So we had a few things that happened during that one. We did a Hoosier River Watch training, the first one that we've offered since Naturalist Rachel Felling became certified. So we did have 12 for that one. We did 2 creek cleanups. So in total, we had, I'm just trying to number here, 160 pounds of trash removed. So obviously not tons and tons as we've had in the past, but that's a good thing. That means that we are actually staying very active on it, and it's getting harder and harder to find the trash that's in the creek. So we prefer that one than anything else. A few other things we did, our National S'mores Day Campfire again. We've brought back Introduction to Pickleball, and this week we actually start our Women's League out at Mulberry Fields. We finished up our park and plays at the different HOAs. We saw a pretty dramatic drop in attendance from June to August. So we are going to, Megan and I are going to sit down and kind of re-look at what park and play looks like for next year and going forward. So kind of doing a little bit of refresh now that we've had a couple years under our belts on that one. But we will be out at the farmers markets this month as well in September. So, and those always have great attendance for people. A couple fun things. We actually received a MyBor grant for $5,000 to purchase 4 igloos that we will be using for Winterfest and for some other events. So we're kind of brainstorming on how we can pull that into some of the events we have planned, as well as some potential new things to be doing during Winterfest. We also have a naturalist intern, Amal, who is working with us. She started August 13th. She's going to be here till the beginning of November So it's nice to have, as Molly is on maternity leave, and she wants to learn. She's trying all kinds of new things. We've got several different projects that she's helping with. So it's been a nice addition to the Nature Center, and we're helping her out as she tries to figure out what she wants to do with her career. So, and then we wrapped up our 100 hours outside on August 31st. We ended up with 248 people that registered. 56 of those actually reached 100 hours or more. And part of that project was who could get the most hours to win kind of a prize pack from the Parks Department and from the Parks Foundation. And we actually had, our winner was Thomas Martineau, who he 502 hours. Because this summer he ended up walking the Appalachian Trail. So that kind of helps when you're pulling like 12, 13-hour days out on the trail. But it was fun because him and his family actually joined us during the Fall Festival Parade. So they got to walk in the parade with us as we kind of brought Jurassic Park to life, if anyone had a chance to see us. If not, there's a reel on our Facebook that's doing very popular. So. But that's all, unless you guys have any questions.
Anyone have questions? Great work as always, Mindy. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
All right, next, fortunately, Amy Nooney, our Parks Attorney, is under the weather, so we have Mallory here today. Did you have anything you want to discuss,
No.
Ralph? Okay, so
She didn't mention anything, and
Okay.
I haven't seen anything that I've looked through.
Okay, very good. So if there's anything in these other moments, we may reach out for you on those then.
Okay, great.
All right, would you believe next is the 200 South Park improvements?
Thank you, John. So years ago, prior to the reorganization, there was a segment of land that, upon its eventual potential development, there would be a park dedication associated with that. So as that area in Union Township was incorporated into Zionsville with the reorganization, so too did that requirement for if those adjoining properties were to be developed, there would be a park dedication with that. So that is in motion with the Union Woodlands project that was approved and has passed through Plain Commission and Council and is now in its primary stage of implementation and construction. So at some point in the near future, this board will be approached with the donation of those acreage at minimum 35 acres. So we have been working closely with that development team. The Parks Department was approached by a second development team that wanted to discuss some opportunities for our park system and the potential for developing that parcel of land further into an active park rather than just being donated associated with the previously approved project. So I will turn it over to our guests in the audience to further explain kind of their proposal and where they are in their project.
So, yeah, once you get yourself,
Can I get clarity on scope here? So this was prior, this is probably more for Jared, just so I make sure I understand. So this is a prior commitment of land, and now we're looking to change the use of that?
So the commitment of land is already established. That'll be forthcoming for this board.
Okay.
The conversation tonight is related to a project immediately adjacent to the project that was already approved.
Got it.
This project is still going through those initial steps, and Steve Pittman here will speak more to that on his project in just a minute as he gets loaded up.
Thank you.
go. So once you get yourself set up there, make sure you please state your name and your organization, where you're from, and all the.
Thank you.
So-
Hello and good evening. For the record, my name is Steve Pittman. I'm with Pittman Partners. I reside at 370 Center Court. With me tonight is Wayne Falstad, also with Pittman Partners. He's a resident of Zionsville. As Jared talked a little bit about this, we're a developer. We've put 150 acres under contract off of 421, and 200. And you can see it, that area in the green on the overhead screen. Can you guys see that okay? And so the developer who's developing all the property behind that is a company called Platinum Properties. And Platinum Properties, and I believe they're probably going to be breaking ground next week. It's going to be happening really soon. I only say that because a lot of people in the area don't believe that any of that land's ever going to be developed, and it's all going to remain a field. So that's forthcoming. And so the developer of that community is someone that we've known for quite some time, personally and professionally. And we've been joint venture partners with them. And we did 2 projects in Carmel where the Carmel Dads Club came to the Parks Department, came to the Planning Department, and they said, our town's growing and we no longer have enough recreational facilities to accommodate all the kids in our system. And they asked the Planning Department if they could, between the Planning Department and the Parks Department, hey, is there any way we can figure out and solve that problem? And so they went to the development community, and the development community typically says, well, let me see if I have any floodplain. Let me see if I have any wetlands. Let me see if I have anything that can't be used at all, and sure, I'll give that to you. We approached it a little bit differently, and we said, how about if we took some land and we created open space and clustered our homes around it, and we took that, instead of just being passive open space, we actually built sports parks and for the Carmel Dads Club. And we knew we had to get the Parks Department to be okay with it. We needed to get the Dads Club and the planning staff and everybody to be okay with it. And everybody thought that was a really good idea and a good deal. And so we did 2 of those. So, and I would encourage you when you're driving around, if you drive down Shelbourne Road, just to the north of 131st Street, we went back there and we did a project. We put 3 we thought it was football fields. The Dad Club used it for football, soccer, and lacrosse. It's called Mark Herman Fields. And it's really cool. We put townhomes around it, put a nice concession area, big parking lot. And on Saturdays, it's just amazing. And it's amazing from my perspective. There may be people who saw that area as rural and should never be developed that don't like those cars. So there's always another opinion about that. But anyway, so everybody liked that so much they wanted to continue. So we went across the street and we did something very similar in our development. We created another park there called Long Ridge Estate. Well, no, I'm sorry, development's called Long Ridge Estates, but we did a park there called Pittman Family Sports Park. And we put in 3 additional fields there with parking and all the things that go with it. And when you go out there and you see that, it's something I'm really proud of, and something makes me feel good about what I do. Because sometimes you don't. It's not exciting to meet with everybody that doesn't like what you're doing. And so, so I started talking to Paul Rio in Platinum Properties, and I said, hey, I'm aware that Zionsville baseball, softball, and their Challengers program are starting to turn kids away. And I had heard that in the community, and John Stair said something to me that you ought to meet with those folks. So we did, and we started talking about this concept of taking a portion of that ground that Jared talked about and build a sports park back there. And so we worked with the baseball, softball folks. They told us the dimensions that they needed. They asked us, they wanted fields that were turfed. And in fact, here I'm talking, I'll give you a nice picture. And then we also, as part of that, would be putting in a pickleball park with 8 pickleball courts, and in there you see also a nice parking facility. I think that's 375 parking spots. And so part of doing that would be a number of parties have to come together, but it'd be our development company, Pittman Partners, working with Platinum Properties in their development, working with the parks, working with Zionsville Little League Baseball. We would, if something like this would make sense, this ground would be, I think you guys, per agreement, have to have a minimum, is it 35 acres? Would have 35 acres, maybe more, would be dedicated to you all. You guys would have some sort of contractual relationship with the Little League Zionsville people, or whatever you decided to do. And part of us doing this, we get to a little bit more than you guys are probably used to dealing with. Our proposal would be we would take their development and our development, we take their park impact fees, our park impact fees, and then additional money out of our budget to build all this. So you'd have the land and the improvements. And so for this to work, for this to happen, we're just starting this process of, and we'll be heard before the Plan Commission in October, a project that's just south of 200 on 421 that calls for multifamily and commercial on 421, transitioning back to, the rest of it would be residential, different forms of residential. We like to say that we're trying to put in affordable housing. We're hearing a lot of people talk about all the young people who want to come back and can't afford. And I'm almost embarrassed to tell you affordable housing means townhomes that start at 450 and single-family detached housing that maybe starts at 600 and goes up to 950. That's what we're starting to talk about affordable now. And so we want to start having this conversation with you guys. And is this a good thing? Is this something that you guys want to pursue? And, we don't expect a decision made tonight, but we felt it was good to start this conversation, and then if it was something you did want to explore and discuss, then we could start putting all the numbers to it and providing all the detail that you guys would want. The baseball fields would not have lights. The pickleball courts would not have lights because we're south of the airport, and they won't, part of their FAA guidelines, so we can't put lights there. Now, you can put some lights on the parking lots and there's certain parameters to light a parking lot, not impact them. So you would be limited, as you couldn't be playing 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the evening. But anyway, so that's the presentation. That's what we want to start the discussion with you and answer any questions you all have.
Yeah, I've got some questions, so thanks for the presentation here. I happen to live close by to that area, and infrastructure is a real problem.
Yeah.
I think 421 forward won't be done for 5 years or so?
5+ years, be my guess, yeah.
Yeah, so what's kind of the traffic you're planning on, particularly with 14 apartments up front? And then the addition of kind of the ball fields here, how does that planning work? Because there's already a problem in that area, and this is only going to complicate the density of that area.
Yeah, no, you're right. We've done a traffic study, and we've identified that there's a problem there today. And then you have 189 houses coming in with Lennar. You got Bradley Ridge coming in, so the problem is going to be exacerbated. The traffic study says that there will need to be a traffic light at 200 and 421, and there'll need to be a northbound left turn lane and a southbound left turn lane to make that operate properly. As part of our development, and when NDOT allowed that to go in, they make you do what's called a warrant analysis. So that would be done. In front of our entryway, we'd have A-cell, D-cell lane, and then a southbound left turn lane, so traffic could continue to move. And someone turning right, people could keep moving north. Someone going, that's making a left-hand turn going south, traffic could still move by them. So that'll make the traffic, much better. But I've heard from a lot of people that I've gone to a couple of the comp plan meetings where they've talked about how awful traffic is starting up at State Road 32 all the way down through here. We're in the process right now of developing the farm at Zionsville, and so we've been interacting pretty significantly with NDOT on the improvements and stuff that need to occur, and so we're well equipped to do that. We know how to interact with them. So yeah, that's my answer to that.
So I'm in Countrywood, so I'm a neighborhood that's adjacent to the new proposed development.
Yep.
So I know there's some opposition coming from my neighborhood.
Yeah.
But I've lived there since 1979. I've been there for a very long time. So.
Well, I was just in a meeting with Sean Hitchcock.
Okay, yeah, very good, awesome.
Yeah.
Yep. So I know this is a very hot topic. What we're concerned about here is obviously more of what you're looking to present to end up belong to the Parks Department, and that is a very nice presentation, or with being able to have some ball fields and such. But there's also we have our limitations of what we can deal with staffing wise, right? Because we're pretty much understaffed with what we have right now. With Carpenter even coming on, we're small but mighty, and we have to be very careful with what's given to us. We're very different than the Carmel. You're probably very well. Our Parks Department is very different than the Carmel's Parks Department.
Yeah.
They're more into the we're parks, right? So we're nature parks, majority.
Yeah.
A lot of passive use parks, where there's are heavy, heavy use parks. So we have to tread lightly when it comes to that, just because we have to think what we can, afford to take on,
Yeah.
correct? So, and I think there's the ability to be able to put that in and such is, I think is there's a lot of positives, and, there's, and, so leaves a lot more questions than answers for, I'm sure, many of us, so I just kind of wanted to kind of throw out a little bit what was in my head right there, so.
It's
You
not,
know-
the land donation, right, generous, although it's like right in line with landing area, right, that's like right in line with the runway, correct?
Yeah.
Can't put
Right,
any
so you're
home-
not
no
gonna
homes can go
develop
there.
it
Which,
in there,
which
right?
makes it maybe not as desirable as some big passive park, right, with
Yeah.
the airplanes going overhead.
Yeah,
On the two projects I mentioned on Shelbourne Road, so both of those were gifted to the Dad's Club, and the Dad's Club manages that and takes care of it. So that'd be one of the things you guys could consider. You make that some sort of deal where you have the Zionsville Little League baseball, softball challenger program be responsible for that. The parks, the pickleball courts, I envision those just being like tennis courts. Hey, they're open. Do you want to use them or not? But I will tell you, I don't live in Zionsville now. I live in Carmel, in West Carmel. But we did live here when my kids were young, and we were big beneficiaries of the soccer fields out there on the west side. And there was a lot of complaints. We don't want soccer. We don't want all the cars and all the things that go with that. And so I think a lot of that represents change for people, right? If you're out there and you're not used to that, and all of a sudden the traffic comes, like you don't like it, but then the next people come in, they think it's wonderful. But yeah, I mean, if this is something you guys don't want, I think that's good for us to know, because it would change our plans.
I don't think it's something we want.
Yeah, I was
It's in
gonna
our
say-
plan, but we have, like I said, just what we need to be.
Yeah, I don't want, I totally agree with John. I think we have to be cognizant of, with any sort of, change to the system, what the operational and maintenance implications of that are. Because as you know, it's a lot easier to raise money for capital or to take out a loan for capital than it is for maintenance and R&R. But that said, my firm is doing the master plan right now for Lions Club. And so we've gotten to know a lot of the ins and outs of sort of how the Little League interfaces with the Lions Club, who owns the land. And, the Little League really does everything necessary to maintain and operate and improve those fields. So that said, I feel like an instance like this, I'm not a fan as a park planner of saying no outright because of a concern. Let's find a way to mitigate the concern through conversations about, if the Little League would be the primary programmer, what sort of maintenance and operational agreements would they be open to between the town, assuming the town is the landowner. So when you say you turned it over in the prior projects to the Dad's Club, is that just like a fee simple transaction? Okay. So that, that to me is something that, Jared, I think you could start to have conversations with and report back. I'm again, from my professional perspective, a huge proponent of engaging the private development community in meeting parks and recreation needs. And I know that that's done sometimes passively through park impact fees, but I think it can be done, the impact of those contributions can be made even more significant when there's actual participation like this. But I think that the successful examples of this, with communities like Henderson and Nevada, where their park system has been almost, not entirely, but 50% or more built through private development agreements. It can be done really successful if all parties are at the table equally, and there's open and transparent conversations, and that one party values the other, right? And where I've seen it done also really poorly is kind of, as you alluded in a joking fashion, right? That it's like, oh, here's the square retention pond, and please deduct our park impact fee, and I would just say thanks, but no thanks, right? So I think there's a way through collaborative discussion to find something that works for everyone. I think this would be, it certainly is a need that the community has. I think from a programmatic standpoint, my only concern with a facility like this is, man, it sucks that we can't light it, like that.
does that make you question just the physical location. I mean, this entire development basically sits at the end of a runway. It's very noisy, like you're gonna be out there with planes constantly going, like, is that really where we would want this
I
as
think
a
that is
community?
actually where you would want what I would call an active park versus a passive park. So would this be a great site for, like, candidate site for a birding sanctuary or a nature preserve?
I mean, I played
No.
baseball growing up, I can't imagine playing a game with
Right.
planes that.
Well,
low.
like one of the largest parks I've worked on is in the same type of landing zone of the MIA airport in Miami.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a plane that flies over every 60 seconds and you just kind of get used to it. So I don't think the traffic would be quite that much. I will say I've heard reports that that airport is
It's picking up,
picking
for sure,
up
for sure.
substantially.
Yeah.
But
I'm
that
not
said,
taking
when
it,
we
so.
look at, because again, that sort of runway, what zone is it in? What approach zone? Do you know?
I don't.
I don't know if you have the map, okay. So there's different requirements for different zones, and the closer you get to the end of the runway, obviously the more restrictive they are. But that land is kind of like wetland, right? It's like, we can't do much with it, let's make it a
I
park.
think that ends right at 300,
Yeah, so,
or 200, excuse me, sorry.
so that said, if I were gonna program a facility like that, or a parcel like that, I would make it an active recreation use, simply because the passive recreation would be somewhat disturbed by airplanes, I guess, but it is still a decent length from the actual runway itself. I mean, you're in one of the approach zones, but you're not gonna have planes overhead that are 40 feet in the air.
I would challenge you to go stand there and watch a plane fly, and watch a plane land there. I would challenge you to do that. Living on
You know,
that side of town, I would challenge you.
On the, you know, the housing demand, because people have said something similar,
Yeah.
that, oh, there's no way you can sell housing there. You know, and that people, Brookhaven wasn't going to be successful.
Well, Esther
And-
stepped out because everyone was supposed to sign something, so.
Yeah, and so, and Brookhaven's been very successful. And then, you know, when this development adjacent to us called Union Woodlands with 189 homes that are going in, or 180, whatever it is, with Lennar, people were like, oh, they're not gonna move forward. And they're telling me they're breaking ground next week. They went to the FAA, they got every one of their homes approved. You know, the air, you know, so, and people are very aware of what they're adjacent to. If you look at, I pulled this up with the runway protection zone, you can see that I think that we're out of it, but the easternmost portion, we might have a little bit of our property in the runway protection zone, but if you look at, you know, that study that they did, that the airport did, that they wanted the frontage of our property to be campus housing. So they called for campus housing. The front part, where the land we have under contract from the Diocese of Lafayette, and then in the back behind us, they called that, they wanted that to be open space. And, you know, so that comp plan of open space, that's now 189 houses. So now you got a piece of ground between us, campus housing, this housing. And then, and I agree also as well that, well, I think Jared and I, we talked about even on that area north of those fields, because it's not going to be, you know, some place where there's going to be a bunch of birds and stuff. In fact, the airport's going to come in and do some clearing, because they don't want that. They don't want wet detention ponds and all that. But we talked about making that area, I think, you talked about making that a Frisbee golf area, and, you know, having more activity like that. And so that, I think that makes sense.
Well, and something out like in sort of the back and forth, again, that's why I'm not in favor of just yes or no at this point. I think there's a lot more conversation to have is, you know, you could run a quick calculation and see what the park impact fee contributions would be for these two developments, right, and generate a number. And then I think it would be important for us to understand, well, what is the delta that you are willing, or your developments are willing to contribute on top of that? Because that then says, you know, that's kind of how I would make that decision of, well, should we put this here? Is it the ideal site? It's maybe not the ideal site, but it, you know, sites are rarely ideal. But if we do put it here, then we're getting you know, $1.50 for every dollar that we would otherwise get, which would allow us to do a project that we might not otherwise be able to do. You know, I'm not saying that that's what it's going to be. I don't know what your contribution, you know, sort of above and beyond the impact fees would be, but I think that's part of the decision sort of framework is what does that look like, and what are you willing to build, you know, sort of day one? What are your expectations of the town or the Parks Department as it relates to capital? And then Jared, your opinion, can you work out an agreement with the programmer, because looking at the site, maintaining the pickleball courts and the asphalt's not the biggest challenge out there. It's obviously gonna be the diamonds. So is that something that they could even take on? Or are they gonna look to you and say, no, it's your stuff, we just wanna program it, right?
As the Zionsville, have you talked to the Zionsville Little League at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, those infields are all artificial turf.
Right,
So those will be a lot less maintenance being artificial turf.
right.
But by the way, which neighborhood are you in?
Hidden Pines.
Is that
Right
on
behind
the, are you the
Interactive
west side of?
Academy. East side, hidden, behind Interactive Academy.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
So would you, maybe a good thing for me to do next would be Jerry and I to meet with Little League Baseball, softball, and talk about what sort of financial commitment, and maybe come back with, hey, here's the program we'd like to recommend, and here's the dollars, and
Yeah, and I would say on the Little League side, right, I know that they're, at least at Lions Park, they're moving into utilizing some synthetic turf, but that's not the way, they don't have any full synthetic fields right now. So they would be lower maintenance long-term, but there still is maintenance, and that may be equipment that they don't have, the brooms and stuff like that they might need. So I think it would be helpful for me to be more objective if we understood, okay, here's what the park impact fee is. Here's what the, anticipated sort of maintenance and R&R or operational costs might be, and is that digestible by the Little League? And then here's the capital above and beyond the impact fees that your development group would be contributing, and look at those three sort of buckets and say, okay, does it make sense?
right.
And then I guess the other question I had is there any other programmatic elements envisioned long-term for this site, Jared, beyond what we're seeing in this schematic?
Thank you. Yes, so as mentioned, there is some frontage not included in this diagram, so there would be the opportunity, should that also be dedicated to the park system, that could be walking trails or disc golf course. If you'll notice with that entrance drive that kind of bisects the image, there is that acreage to the west or the left of the drive. We see that as an opportunity should Little League wish to expand and maybe have an indoor facility or batting cages or something, that they would have that opportunity there. As well as potentially we have a satellite campus for our maintenance as our park system grows, more northern. So I think there still are some opportunities, but as was mentioned this evening, this would be a large task if we were to encumber this project wholeheartedly day one. So I think that partnership with Little League would be instrumental in your consideration of this. But, pending those conversations and their dedication and commitment to this facility, if we were to just maintain the pickleball courts or to some extent a smaller footprint, I think that's somewhat feasible in the coming years to encumber. But obviously the entire facility, not so much.
So I guess that's maybe another practical question for the development group is, typically these facilities are the last things built in the development, just usually the way it works out. But do you have a sense of a timeline? Is this a 2028 thing, a 2027 thing, sooner? Do you have a sense of that?
So I'll defer to Steve on their timeline, which again is still going through the initial motions that they have to go through the processes. But, I'm a big believer that these types of projects need to coincide with the communities. That way, people are moving in with the expectation of what's going to be there and not being jarred by what's being built after they've already called the place home. So, Steve, do you have any?
Yeah, I can't answer that with specificity, but I would anticipate it wouldn't be like the whole project's done and then all of a sudden we're going to build this. It would be built in conjunction with the project. It wouldn't be the first thing we build, but it would be, if I guess, if we got this thing approved, and then we broke ground at, let's say, summer of next year, I mean, you're probably in 28 probably, you'd have that in?
Okay,
Yeah.
so 3 years or so
Yeah.
out, 2.5, 3 years. So that would give us time, that's the other thing to keep in mind with an opportunity like this, is if you looked at all the numbers and said, okay, it's worth it, but we're gonna have to save a little bit or figure something out, we have a couple years to factor in. It's not like we'd be taking it in tomorrow, right? So that I think as you have your conversations with the Little League, And again, I don't know how they operate contractually with Lions Club, but I think in a project like this where it would be essential, you know, our ownership of it as a town or as a board would be really contingent upon a private operator, I would want them to sign sort of an extended agreement, you know, that would guarantee that, you know, over 5 or 10 years or whatever it is, that they would really be responsible. And maybe there's some taper off that over time, I don't know, but I think it would need to be longer than year to year.
Step in here.
I definitely think also, like, as Zionsville's getting bigger, Little League is probably not the only youth sports league that's going to be looking for more places to house all of these kids. I mean, the soccer field, I know they were looking 10 years ago for more land. The football, you know, everybody's kind of going to start looking, and I think an opportunity to work with a developer who's interested in it is definitely something we can't just, you know, just, I mean, it's pretty, that's appealing. I also agree that you know, if we can't maintain it, we can't do it, but definitely need to entertain the idea. We're gonna have to put them somewhere at
I
some
agree
point.
with all of those points, and I still think this is the wrong spot because it's literally right underneath Warrior Plains land, and it's very loud.
Yeah, Chris, I agree with you. We have to look at it. And then Chad, I'm also sitting there thinking that the difference between the Lions Park
Serenity.
atmosphere and
Yeah.
where they're playing baseball and then walking over to get ice cream and everything's like nice. And then, you know, it feels a little bit like, Ryan, when you're talking about, you know, it's almost like we don't want to get the swampland that nobody can use, and then also here's the land that we can't use for anything else. It's not that it's the exact same thing, but it is kind of.
Right, but I do think, yeah, I don't disagree. I kind of said that, right? Like if
Right.
it's in an approach zone that's coming with a lot of strings attached that a normal parcel wouldn't. But at the same time, in an instance like this, it's also coming with a lot more money than a normal parcel would, right? So that's where it's the sort of push-pull, right? I would say the other thing, again, Henderson's a great, I mean, I can connect you with the director. You can ask them how they've negotiated some of their agreements. I mean, it's been really, really successful there. But a part of that is that every capital project that's negotiated at the beginning of a development, in addition to the capital funds, you know, and the developers actually construct the park project, which is, I think, what you're suggesting is what happened here. That there's a percentage of that, whatever that bucket of money is that they're willing to contribute, that there's a percentage of that that's pulled aside and put into a maintenance and operations endowment dedicated to that facility. So that's something I would also want to think about, is instead of getting, you know, whatever the Pittman Group's, you know, the development group's contribution is, whatever that dollar value is, instead of taking all of that and throwing that into capital as much as we can, put 80% of it into capital and 20% of it into a dedicated fund to maintain and operate the site. And then that way, as an agreement might transition out over time with whoever the private operator might be, Little League, for example, there would be a fund there dedicated to maintain and operate those facilities. So that's something that also you could negotiate up front, right? That I think would sort of change the matrix of, you know, what does it look like for us? Does it make sense?
Chad, I'm going to accept your challenge. I'll go stand over there and watch the planes. See what it's.
Yeah.
Get it.
Well, I used to live out in the DC area, and one of my favorite parks out there, this might sound crazy, is at the end of the runway of Reagan National Airport.
Yep.
People go there, they have picnics, and they watch the planes come overhead, and those are big, big planes. It was loud, but it was also fun and exciting, and little kids love that kind of stuff.
That's a good
So, you know, it might be hard to have a game, I don't know, they don't come, I'm at Union sometimes, and planes do come in there a lot, but
It's all, you know, they're private jets, so.
Yeah. Well, I
This
think
is
that's.
this is even closer than Union.
right,
Yeah.
but so was this
Yeah.
parcel land at Reagan
Yeah.
National. It's
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah. Again, you know, I think it's one of those things we also, you know, have to be careful too, that we're sort of being asked to evaluate the parkland and obviously the airport implications to that are meaningful. But there's a whole planning and zoning conversation that planning and zoning needs to lead to, right? So, I don't know, I think if you can, I'm supportive of evaluating this further. I don't think we have enough information right now, but again, as, you know, I'll stand on my soapbox here. I think that if we want to, in the context, the fiscal context of the state of Indiana, if we want to build and expand our system, we're gonna have to look to partnerships and other alternative, non-traditional delivery methods to do that, because we just can't go out and, you know, pull the bond or raise taxes. So this would be one that we should evaluate and continue to discuss.
I would agree with that.
All right, if that is the consensus of the board, we will meet with representatives of the Little League and discuss that partnership further. We will continue to work with Steve and his team on kind of that breakdown of their input as well as the capital cost and the impact fees. So just to remind you all, this board does have the authority to waive impact fees in lieu of these types of acquisitions or construction, so long that the value of those improvements or land exceed or meet the impact fees. So in this scenario, it's obvious that we are going to exceed that with the proposed project, so we're okay there. But it would be this board that would authorize that waiving of those fees. So we'll do a little bit more digging and investigation and research on this project. Welcome anybody from the community to reach out to the park board and provide their commentary on this, and we'll have more in the near future.
And you can also, as part of that, report back with, here's what we think the impact fee contribution would be just on the books as it is now.
Yes, yep.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think another advantage is if we were doing this in a partnership is the economies of scale of when we're out there moving dirt and putting in storm sewer and water, and because there'll be a concession stand there and sanitary sewer and water and all the things, you know, that the park can benefit from that. If you guys went out there 3 years later and said, hey, this land was dedicated to us, we're going to build this, I think you'd find it much more expensive to build.
Yeah.
Without doubt.
Yeah, and that again comes back to the idea of, like, at the end of the day, if we were to spend $1, what would we get in this instance? Would it be $1.20 or $3?
Yeah.
Right, of value. So.
We'll look at all that.
All right. We appreciate you coming in and sharing your plans with us.
Yeah, thank you for your time, appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. Carpenter Nature Preserve Phase 1 construction documents.
Thank you, John. So along with your packet, there should have been a link to a Dropbox with the very large files that are the construction plans for Phase 1 of the Carpenter Nature Preserve. So pending your conversation and consideration of those plans, with your approval, we would seek to put those out to bid. And our current timeline, we would advertise within the month of September, requiring bids to be turned in late October, and they would be before you all to consider at your November meeting. So that's kind of our timeline. There are a couple of factors that are expediting our need to get this by year end. So last year, there was $75,000 of ARPA funds that were attached to this project for the nature playground. So those funds do have to be dedicated by the end of the year and under contract. So we have built in a contingency should we not receive any favorable bids on this project. We will pull that aspect out and attempt to procure that in time for the December meeting and get that under contract. So definitely don't want to hand those dollars back since they were so graciously awarded. Other than that, we do have several grants associated with this project, and while they do not have definitive dates for when we do need to get it open to the public, one of the requirements of those grants is that it becomes a public nature preserve and park. So there is that expectation, although not defined in black and white, that we do have to get the park open in a certain amount of years. Happy to answer any questions concerning the design or any aspects of the construction documents, and we also have Trisha McClellan of Runsdell, Ernstberger and Associates to answer any questions or more technical questions you might have.
Any questions on it? Or
Yeah, so total construction coming in 5.56. What was budget? You knew I was going to ask that question, Jared. I saw you smile.
Yep. So we have allocated resources. to the project, so that 5.56 was with the contingency and a couple other factors that we have refined out of that. So we have identified funds very close to that, and we will continue to get that in budget. And should the bids not come in our favor, and we will share all the funding sources before you make your decision, we can turn those away and we don't have to award.
So we're not, this is just commitment to go out to bid, not, we're not
Exactly.
correcting the project, right?
Yep.
Correct.
You have a lot more experience than we do, so 65% of CDs is 15% on par, aggressive, or conservative when it comes to how much contingency?
I would say that's standard.
Standard?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd be maybe a little worried at 10, and 20 would be a lot.
A lot. Okay.
Any other
I'm wondering, not to put Tricia on the spot, but if you, I know one of the last times we talked about the playground, we saw the presentation, there was a discussion about incorporating nature play, and I feel like I'm reading the plan and seeing these elements in here, but I didn't know if you wanted to talk us through that, if sort of the elevator pitch of kind of what changed and what you envisioned for that space.
Yeah, we followed your lead, using a lot of the nature play. So there are some elements that are more from a manufacturer, but there's still, like a large tree log or like a log balancing beam versus a more traditional playground. But then also incorporating water play, maybe sand play or mud play even in it. And then a mowed grass area where kids can bring sticks and pine cones and whatever else they find to build teepees or just to, for that inventive kind of play. So those represent, and we did add a little mound where we could. The grading really didn't allow for a lot of that.
Oh, it looks like enough though. Kids will play on that.
Yeah, yeah. And then using the stone steps and boulders too to kind of help just create more opportunities for play. And imagine that whole area, the idea is to activate it. So kids running up and over the bridge and down the hill and, through the middle of it and jumping on and off of, the different play elements as they go along.
Cool. Yeah, it looks good. And it looks like there's a slide built into the hill, right?
Yeah, that's a concrete slide,
Yep.
Which kids love.
Yes.
Absolutely love.
It's a wide one, right?
It's
So
a
you can get two
it's a
people
triple
side by
chute,
side.
so it's a very wide one, yeah.
And the path leading up to it, I assume, is 88 grade.
It is ADA grade, it is stone, so
Sure.
we'll have to be sure and keep it compacted. But yeah, it is graded to be compliant.
Cool. Looks great. I think that would be an exciting addition and seems very carpenter appropriate.
For sure.
Keep in mind, this is the mini playground.
Right.
The bigger playground will go along with the nature center.
Sure.
But for a mini playground with the, pavilion that's out there and think about field trips, that may be out there at the beginning of Carpenter Nature Preserve, it
Well,
would
and
fit right in.
I think it's just a type of play that we just don't really have in our system currently either. So I think it's cool.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, and if there's any doubt that whether kids will come and play on it, I can provide some examples from around the country of just things I've been seeing recently, because there's more and more park systems trying to tie back to nature and get kids back out there. And, we have a very successful program that we do routinely, and where they just build a tree house in the woods, and bringing logs and things to this area is just going to promote that as well.
Yeah, I know we've talked about this a couple board meetings ago, and I appreciate that conversation. I'm really excited about this park, and I see your points now about just more of the natural play and how that can come about and the benefits with it. So I appreciate all the diligence with it.
All right, any other questions? Do we have a motion to approve the Carpenter Nature Preserve Phase 1 construction documents as presented?
So move.
Are we saying that do we need to add to the motion to authorize you to bid them?
Oh, yes, and authorize to bid, request for bid.
So move.
Do we have a
Second.
second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. All right, Carpenter Nature Preserve, ZPF donor MOU.
Thank you, John. So if you'll recall, as we were discussing the municipal bonding of the Carpenter Nature Preserve, and our task was simply just to acquire the land, and as opportunities came to develop it, we would move forward with those. Well, and the Carpenters, as a part of that pitch and that presentation to council, they committed $500,000 towards the conservation and restoration of the Carpenter Nature Preserve, in addition to the donation they were already providing with the land sale. So this is that document outlining those parameters. So as I mentioned, the Carpenters, Jim and Nancy, would pledge $500,000, which would be received to the Zionsville Parks Foundation over the next 3 years. Should the foundation identify projects, they would have the opportunity to present those to our park system. And conversely, our park system could propose projects that would be voted on in a 2/3 vote for approval and authorization of those funds. So the foundation, the department, and the Carpenters themselves would all have opportunities to utilize those funds for the benefit of the preserve. And the parameters that those funds can be utilized were attached as an exhibit. So the ecological study that was conducted by Ecologic as a part of the master planning process kind of captures some of the opportunities for projects out there. So there's no shortage of invasive removal we can do. There's no shortage of restoration work or improving biodiversity we can do for years to come. So the opportunities we have with this endowment essentially on day one to begin to enhance the park is just going to help us in so many ways, just like the grants and the restoration of Eagle Creek. So definitely important to the success of this preserve and our operations of that. So just a couple of other parameters. So the naming rights policy would be retained within this MOU. So should there be a project that quantifies that, the Carpenters could have the right to name that portion of the park, similar to what any donor could do should they pledge something and it be approved by the park board. Should the Zionsville Parks Foundation dissolve, those funds would transfer to the town and the Parks Department, Park Board for utilization still. So they would be retained essentially to benefit the preserve in any capacity. So with your consideration and any discussion, I would recommend that we consider approving this MOU between the three parties, that is the Carpenters, the Zionsville Parks Foundation, and the Zionsville Park Board.
Does anyone have any questions, concerns? Do we have a motion to approve the Carpenter Nature Preserve ZPF donor MOU?
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Excellent. All right. Heritage Trail Park Hoop House.
Thank you, John. So dating back to our previous 5-year master plan and kind of the initial concept of the Heritage Trail Park was the inclusion of a hoop house that would adjoin our community gardens there and provide an opportunity for expanding garden programming, which we currently have very minimal opportunities for. So that's been a long objective of the department to finish up this park and include that structure. So earlier this year, we purchased a kit for the hoop house. The concrete pad that adjoins the community gardens was specifically built so it could accommodate that hoop house, and we want to hire professional services to construct that, give the seal of approval that it's built to spec, which has been authorized by the state, and there is a structure release associated with this. We've worked closely with the fire department to ensure that we will have the appropriate parameters for fire safety. The structure would only be utilized for garden programming and its extension of our staff, as well as the fostering of native plantings. So we have recently, as I mentioned earlier, have a natural resource division within our maintenance team, and each year we purchase, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars of plugs and trees to benefit our park system. And this would be an opportunity to actually collect seed from those sites we've already established and foster those and save funds. And, the dream down the road would be able to actually foster those and sell those back to the community so that we're, improving the quality of habitat throughout Zionsville and not just our park system. But for day one, we'll focus on those seedlings and getting them in the ground throughout our park system. So we bid this out to 3 organizations, and we received the R.L. Turner quote for assembling the hoop house and attaching the electrical components. So there is a thermostat, fan, and 2 roll-up doors, which will be mechanical roll-up doors. And for those services to affix that to the pad and design and build the hoop house, it would be $29,180. And we would utilize the previous $100,000 donations that we've received to make this initiative come true for our park system.
So this will come from one of the donations we received?
Yes.
Was it last year, I believe it was?
Either year, yeah.
Yeah, well, the last 2 years, we've received like 50, 100,000, right, so. Okay.
Yep. So for the past 2 years, we've split that $100,000 donation 50% to capital improvements
Okay.
and 50% to our programming or natural resource team.
This is a long time in the making, right, so.
Yep.
Anyone had any questions about this?
Is there lighting inside?
There would be 120 service, but we aren't necessarily planning on lighting. It's kind of a dawn to dusk 3-season structure. While there will be roll-up doors, it's still that film on the side. So fortunately, this is under observation of our camera that's on site, so we'll be able to keep eyes on it should any mischief happen. But for the most part, it'll only be activated when our staff are there.
Will it come down during the winter?
No, we'll keep it up, and
Okay.
then it is wind rated for Indiana, and should, damage happen to that film, we will just replace that.
Okay.
Is it warranted for some amount of time?
I would have to check on the kit how long that's warranted. I apologize for that.
That's okay. Any further questions? You have a motion to approve the bid from RL Turner for $89,809.
Whoa,
29,000,
29,000. Yes.
sorry. Right,
29,000.
29,000,
Yes.
okay. 890,
180,
180.
29,180.
To assemble the hoop house at Heritage Trail Park.
So moved.
We have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
What you don't know is he works for RL Turner. Just trying to.
I do not. They never would work with me, so. All right. Old business. Anyone have anything they'd like to discuss? All right, claims. Anyone get a chance to review claims as presented? Yep. We have a motion to approve claims as they are presented.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Next meeting will be October 9th, Wednesday, 7 PM. So do we have a movement for adjournment?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. See you November 9th.
All those.